Good afternoon. You're watching AB Live, a brand new news-based chat show in which we discuss topics ranging from news, politics, technology, and so much more. On today's episode, we will be discussing 5G, the much-discussed technology that is coming into the market very, very soon. And for this discussion, in the studios right now, we have the head of Ericsson GCC, that's Wojciech Bajda, and the Senior Vice President for Telecom Solutions of Gemalto, Sherry. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having us.
Right, so I will just straightly get into it, which is 5G, the topic that we are discussing today. So what exactly is 5G? We know of it as a technology, an emerging solution that is coming into market, but what are the nitty-gritties of it?
All right, so first of all, 5G is not just the new generation of radio. It's much more. It's the end-of-end platform which will enable new services and new use cases. It goes in parallel to the existing networks. It brings new efficiency, extremely low latency, high speed, high reliability. All the applications which demand real time and low volume application like augmented reality or virtual reality, they need 5G.
Right, interesting. So you did mention some of the emerging technologies here, for example, augmented reality, there's artificial intelligence that we've been talking about. Sherry, I'd like to bring you in here. So what role do you think all of these emerging technologies are going to play in accelerating 5G?
I think when you look at 5G in itself, it's not a standalone technology that delivers services to end consumers and enterprises. It's really part of an ecosystem. The term 5G goes very much hand in hand with artificial intelligence, with digital transformation, VR, AR, because they all play their respective parts. So when we look at the combination of all of these, what it really is building an ecosystem. And those ecosystems are driven by many different things, but I think the lifeline behind all of that is data. And the consumption of data is increasing. You know, we now have the ability to shoot 4K video from our smartphones, which we didn't have before. So those large amounts of data require a very different type of handling, and that's the value of what 5G brings into that equation. But from a more holistic perspective, the analysis of the data, the ability to put clever machine learning algorithms to analyze the data to enable machine-to-machine communications, be it in a transport capacity, utilities, or healthcare, for example, is the overriding service. And that service is really part of what enterprises would be looking at to transform their own businesses to newer future digital economies.
Interesting that you mentioned it, because we've all heard this for a while now, that 2G, 3G, 4G were for the people, whereas 5G is essentially for things. Would you agree with that?
Well, first of all, 5G, it's not an isolated thing, right? If you want to have successful 5G, you have to have strong foundation, which is 4G. 5G comes, it doesn't replace 4G, it comes on top. And there are certain application and use cases where you have to use 5G. Majority of data traffic will be still generated by 4G network if you look at the coming years. For example, in UAE, today, yearly data consumption per user is around 3 gigabit.
Okay.
We expect in 2024 it will be 15 gigabits. It's a huge growth. The high resolution terminals, screens, high resolution video, a lot of video consumption, that requires much more reliable and much more efficient networks. 5G will come on top, yes, definitely. It will play a significant role in digitalization of industries, automotive, manufacturing, productions. All this will benefit from 5G. It will facilitate and enable new use cases, which today maybe we're not even aware of.
Right.
The end user like all of us here, will also benefit from 5G, but I'm pretty sure for next couple of years we will be still enjoying a lot of 4G applications and usage.
Right, so although it might be deployed very soon, the mass usage won't be really seen at this point. Is that what you're trying to say?
Yeah, I think the first implementation, and because the 3GPP standard is just coming now, the first commercial implementation with standardized terminals and commercially available terminals will start from 2019, spring, early summertime. But if we are talking about more massive rollout, yes, 2020 and onwards. We predict in Ericsson that by 2024 there will be around 1.5 billion subscription of 5G.
Oh.
So if you look back, if you look at the past, this is the fastest rolling technology comparing to 4G, 3G or 2G.
Right, so you mentioned 1.5 billion subscription, and you also said that it's more commercial usage that we've seen. So Sherry, bringing you in here again, what is the kind of revenue you think that this technology and the implementation of 5G could generate for a region and for a country like the UAE?
I think rather than focus on a number revenue, if we break it down to its respective parts across consumer services, across enterprise services, the type of revenues that it generates is around the ability of enterprises to actually transform their businesses into new revenue streams, which in specific areas in terms of the industrial sector, in terms of oil and gas, not just is a case of the revenues that it generates, but also in the case of process optimization that it brings with the ability to deliver high-speed networks in delivering services. So the potential for revenue depends on which report you read today. All of them have respective numbers. The most important thing to note out of that is that the numbers are quite huge. How fast we get to that is going to be dependent on how fast we have the uptake of 5G services on the network side as well as the devices side of the business. And once we have the proliferation of devices and networks to a point where we've achieved critical mass, the number's not going to be the issue anymore. Because I think it is imperative that we view 5G as an evolution of where we are today, not just as a replacement of where we are today. So it is something that delivers the growth potential on digital strategies that the CIOs and the boards of the enterprise organizations are looking at today.
I agree. So Ericsson does a lot of reports, annual reports, in which you do give us more numbers and statistics about revenue streams, etc. So do you have a comment on this?
Well, on the global level, we expect that thanks to digitalization of different industries, there will be new revenue streams definitely for service providers, and probably on the global level it can be estimated at the level of between $200 and $600 billion.
At the global level?
At the global level,
yeah.
Right. And definitely oil and gas is one of the industries that may benefit from new use cases, IoT and 5G. But what is important to understand, it's not only about revenue, it's also about how they can optimize their own business and their own operation, how they may become more efficient, more cost optimized, and less human intervention, more automated operation. This is what the enterprises will benefit from.
Right, so now that you've mentioned automation, I have to ask, what is the job opportunities that this entire sector can produce? Cherry?
I think it's a scary thought when you think about the future job opportunities, but the type of jobs that will be enabled in the future probably don't exist today. We see the rise of these fast, low latency ecosystems delivering digital transformation technologies and the rise of data. And we see more and more the rise of things like data scientists coming in, which if you look back 10 years ago, there were no data scientist jobs out there. So potentially what could be delivered will be dependent on the type of transformation that comes about. What the type of jobs that will be enabled will be around the ability to handle large amounts of data. There'll be a lot of artificial intelligence engineers. There'll be a lot of VR engineers and AR engineers that are delivering services in that ecosystem. But I will reiterate that a lot of the jobs that we will see in the future are probably not jobs today. And that is the benefit of what building 5G networks and ecosystems brings to the economy of a country like the UAE.
Interesting. So now that we're sort of talking about newer jobs replacing the older jobs that are there currently in the market, would you say that 5G as a technology would eventually end up replacing cable networks or broadband for that?
So, well, there is this. There are use cases which are related to fixed wireless access, where the radio may replace the last mile of fiber to the end user. Right. Today, this is being done mainly on 4G massive MIMO, and it works quite well. Yes, 5G will bring it to the next level. This will be called kind of wireless fiber.
Okay.
And will definitely will be a good solution or alternative to the fiber. It all depends on the business case. It all depends on how easy it is to lay down the fiber and build the last mile using fiber. What is the regulation in the country? It's not that it will completely replace fiber. I mean, we also have to understand the physics, and fiber has so much to offer, right? But 5G will be a very competitive technology when it comes to last mile to the end user for internet, for TV, for video, for everything.
Right, interesting. You've mentioned a lot of things there that I really want to dwell into, but one interesting thing you mentioned was regulations. So now that we are going to see a mass deployment of 5G, especially in 2019, which is the date that has been set, do you think that there are going to be, or there is rather a need for newer regulations and rules to come about in terms of implementing it in the region?
First of all, it starts with the spectrums, right? And there's a lot happening, and in this region, in GCC, all the countries, I think, and all the regulatory bodies are very supportive when it comes to making the spectrum available to the operators, especially the high band, which was not very much used with previous technologies. I think what is more important is to make sure that the operators' spectrum is an asset, and it can be a costly asset. So what is important is to help service providers to use this asset to the maximum, to get the best return of investment. So they can use the asset regardless of the technology.
Okay.
If it's mid band, I mean, it can be used for 4G, it can be used for 5G. It can be dynamically switched between different technologies. And high band, of course, is mainly for 5G. So spectrum is the starting point. And then, of course, the other regulatory task force which work on making sure that it's safe, is friendly, is available to even remote areas and not only big cities.
Right, so since Sherry, you deal with securities a lot on a larger scale, would you also agree with that point in terms of rules and regulations being set for this?
Absolutely. I think it's very important to have the right regulatory framework in place which protects the consumers as well as creates a level playing field for all stakeholders within that ecosystem to deliver their technology and enable new services. Spectrum is one part of it, but as you go further into that ecosystem, data is another part of it. So under the guidance of His Highness Sheikh Mohammed, in 2016, the Open Data Law was passed, which deals with the dissemination and exchange of data from various different devices, as well as standardization bodies that come into how cloud security will be managed in a 5G ecosystem. So I think individual regulatory bodies working together is very important to bring these ecosystems up organically, to create one ubiquitous level of service which delivers trust to the end consumer. And I think that's the most important point when we look at 5G services, is to make sure that the comfort level of the end consumer with the service is very good. Because if you were to walk on the street and ask the end consumer what is 5G, they'll say it's 4G plus 1, right? They don't really know what it really delivers. Now, in order for them to have a comfort level with the service, they must understand the value behind that technology. And I think the regulatory bodies, to put the right legislative framework, is very important in building that trust with the end consumers.
And I think, yeah, trust is a very, very important word you've used there. But for all the viewers who've just joined us now, we are discussing 5G. So over the existing technologies, there's 4G, there's LTE. What is the main difference essentially between 5G and LTE? And what is the advantages of 5G over the other technologies we have today?
So to answer in 2 words, it's speed and latency, right? These are the 2 things. Latency is the most important for the critical applications, for self-driving vehicles, for example, right? Or remote management of production lines, or work in the mining industry. That's the main difference. But again, it's important to understand that 5G comes on top of 4G. It's a complement. It doesn't replace 4G, and for next couple of years, we still believe the majority of data growth will come from 4G.
Right.
That will be the main driving point.
Right. So for you and I, or maybe not you, for me and the viewers, what do you think is the utility of 5G is going to be in the immediate future?
I think first of all, the application, that the use case that we see the most tangible one, short term, is fixed wireless access, definitely. In cases where the operator, the service provider see no business sense to lay down the fiber, build the fiber, using of 5G for fixed wireless makes sense. The whole ecosystem, the devices are also coming up and will be available soon. And then definitely in the transportation, in the automotive, that's the most advanced industries. Ericsson is currently having around 20 plus agreements with different industries working on use cases, because we believe that we have to help the service providers to come up with the right use cases, because this is where they will succeed and they will get new revenue stream which will help us to drive the 5G development.
Right, but again, while talking about the scope of 5G, isn't it a slightly scary thought, considering there's technology and there's just technology which is mainly dependent on Internet of Things and things like that, having so much power and so much control. So Sherry, bringing you in here as a securities representative in the whole aspect of it, how secure is the 5G network as of the resources that we have today?
So, in terms of 5G technology, it is leveraging on a lot of best practices and principles that the industry has ratified and formulated over the years in terms of data centers and cloud computing. As an extension of that, one of the core principles of delivering a 5G network is the ability to do network slicing, for example. And that inherently brings with it the ability to secure the data privacy for that end client. Now, extending the principles of cloud computing and data centers to enable cloud security, which over a period of time could also be provided as a service to the end enterprise as well. But when we look at 5G, another core function of 5G is edge computing. So that attack surface has suddenly started to grow from what is in the cloud to what probably extends out into the edge. And having these remote edge clouds or having the ability to do processing and analysis of data at the edge means that we are no longer looking at data at rest. We're looking at data in motion. We're looking at data stored on the edge as well. And the way that we view security in terms of 5G, especially in terms of IoT for mission critical applications, is to look at an end-to-end approach.
Right.
And the ability to actually secure the data as it is actually at the edge, in transit, or whether it's in the cloud itself, in one ubiquitous life cycle is very important. And that's what Gemalto brings in terms of its technology. We've signed up industry partnership with the likes of Intel, for example, to make sure that we are actually bringing security right down to the processor level in IoT applications today.
Right.
And that, again, leverages on what I talked about earlier in delivering trust to the end consumer. So one of the things, Wojciech mentioned it earlier, is around automotive services and vehicle-to-vehicle communications. Sure, 5G will deliver the speed and the latency, but in terms of being able to have a trusted relationship between two vehicles to make sure that the integrity of the data is not compromised is very important. So the way that we look at security in terms of 5G is not traditionally just looking at it in the cloud, but looking at it from the end-to-end service perspective.
Interesting, but while talking about the UAE infrastructure and the UAE enterprises, do you think the infrastructure that we have currently is adequate enough to support 5G services and of course the security solutions that are being provided by the likes of Gemalto, etc.?
Well, UAE is probably the most developed country, one of the most developed countries in the region when it comes to ICT. And both service providers are very active when it comes to launching and introducing new technologies. Both are looking into 5G, both are looking into virtualization and cloud computing. So I think it's a good foundation for next technology shift and next technology introduction. What is also important is that UAE is very good from the end user point of view. You have very young population with developed digital skills, people who are curious, who want to try new things, and they are not afraid of trying new things. Also, they can afford the new latest smartphones.
Right.
The smartphones affordability is great here. So all this plus the great support from the government and regulatory makes this market a perfect place to bring new technologies and to make use of new technologies.
Right, so currently when we're talking about 5G again from a more user perspective and not a commercial perspective, we speak about speed, we speak about latency, there's no buffering essentially, which is completely going to be avoided. But what are the hardware requirements here?
So when it comes to hardware requirements, it starts with the complete network modernization. Again, it's not only about radio. Yes, radio is an essential component. You need to have radio which will support 5G and which will support different spectrum bands. So this is the kind of starting point. But it also goes to the core network, to the billing and charging, because you have to be able to provision and charge this new customers, new use cases. There will be a lot of database, new use cases which you have to be able to take care of. So from network perspective, there's a lot of work to do, and as I said before, it's extremely important that the spectrum that they have in their hands is well used, that they can grow the 4G and advanced LTE. Advanced LTE is something which is happening all around the globe, where you can have 25 gigabit LTE network, and build this solid foundation for 5G. And 5G should, I believe, will come as a specific application for specific use cases. The nationwide coverage will definitely happen over time, but the first spots of 5G we will see for very, very specific use cases.
But speaking of which again, so last year or during the Winter Olympics in South Korea, we saw that there was a 5G deployment there in South Korea. This is way ahead of most countries across the region where we're talking about 2019, 2020, etc. And in this region, we're going to see a number of events happening during the due course of this year and next year. This year itself, we've seen the Formula 1 happening in Abu Dhabi, events in Saudi Arabia, etc. So do you think, like you just mentioned right now, do you think these specific events would actually lead to the emergence of 5G a little sooner than expected?
So these events are great places to actually test the technology, because it's a very large concentration of people in a very confined space. So to actually put the technology through its paces, you know, what was done in the Winter Olympics and what are done in football events, for example, to trial out LTE Advanced or 5G, is to really put that technology through its paces, because most of people have smartphones, and when you go to a stadium watching a football match, you're actually streaming real-time data or large volumes of data onto your device to actually see who's the man of the match or who scored the last goal and so on. So it's a great place to test that. It is also a test bed that will actually spill outside the stadiums, onto the streets, into the buildings and so on. So we would see over the course of this year and next year more of these events using the current 5G rollout programs as testing the technology and seeing the impact of it to the end consumers. If you actually do a contrast to the experience that the stadium goers are having without 5G, they would probably be buffering. They would probably not be able to all get access to data services. They would all probably be competing for that same piece of the spectrum. They would be a congested network environment. And those are the issues that will be resolved by 5G. But extending outside the end consumers as well, being able to leverage on 5G technology to actually do live real-time feeds from the stadium back into the studios and back into the homes is something that is going to revolutionize the way that we actually broadcast these events in the future.
Interesting. So looks like 5G is here almost, and it's here to revolutionize the way data is consumed and broadcast. Thank you so much for joining us today on AB Live, and thank you for those valuable insights. We have learnt a lot today.
Thank you
Thank
very
you for
much.
having us.
And thank you for watching AB Live. We will be back again next Tuesday with another topic to discuss. So don't go anywhere.